Okay, we are live. I will go ahead and send out a tweet.
Mine's still not showing up. Oh, here it is.
Oh, okay, good.
There we go. Yeah, I just put the link on Instagram as well.
Awesome. Alrighty. Sometimes I remember to have a tweet ready to go, and sometimes I don't. You never know. Okay. And you said it is showing up now, the live stream? Yeah. Okay, cool. So we can kind of just hang out as we wait for people. It feels a little like unreal to like finally be reading and discussing this book because it's been
like
so
we've been
long
waiting
coming.
for it to come out for so long and watching the dates move backwards and backwards.
Yeah, which I know happens, but it's just like, wow, I actually can read this book now.
Yeah, because wasn't the original plan that it would be out when we started this project?
Yeah, like I think so, or it was gonna be. It might have been because we were planning on. I think we were planning from the beginning on taking a break, so it might have been set to come out like 1 or 2 months after we would have finished if we hadn't done a break, but like pretty close. And then it got pushed back, and then it got pushed back. Like it's still not out in the US because that release got pushed back. I don't understand. Yeah, I don't understand how publishing works. Clearly publishing doesn't understand how publishing works either.
It's true.
Okay, I think we have a couple people watching. Let us know if you're hanging out in the comments. We're gonna do what we usually do and wait just a little bit. Okay.
Hello.
Well, I'm glad you finished in time. I was cutting it close as well. I finished last night because I somehow wasn't realizing how many read-along things I had close together. But it worked out.
Yeah, well, it's long as well. I hadn't realized. I just saw it in a bookshop the other day. I was like, this is a longer book than I thought it was.
Yeah, it's like almost 500 pages. And they're like big pages too. It's a tall book. All right. Finished 2 hours ago. Nice.
It's commitment.
Still on time. Right, so I figure probably we'll just give it like 1 or 2 more minutes. I did have, so during our like crafting live show that we did yesterday, Huck was asking me if this would be a good one to start with for Frances Hardinge. And I feel like it could be, like, if it's one that you're interested in, I feel like it's a good example of the things that she tends to do and that she does really well, but it's not like the weirdest of her books, you know?
Like, it's not the weirdest, but it is complicated.
It is. Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Like, there's so many random side characters who like show up for 2 chapters and then you never meet again, which I feel like is unusual for her.
Yeah. I feel like the only part that felt a little overcomplicated, and obviously we'll get into this for the official live show, but like there was a part near like the 3/4 mark, I feel like, where it was like the figuring everything out thing, and you're like, okay, wait, which of you are the bad guys again? Like, which is kind of something she tends to do, so not like entirely unexpected, but Okay, so I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Obviously, people are welcome to just show up in the middle too. Thank you also if you are watching this back. I know we've had some people doing that, which we really appreciate. So yeah, we're going to get started with our final book discussion for the Frances Hardinge read-along, which is Unraveller. Very bittersweet to like finally be talking about this book. Before we get into the introduction stuff, I do want to mention that Hana and I are going to be doing one more live show for this read along. It's going to be kind of our wrap up, like a reflection. Originally, we were planning on tacking it on to the end of this one, but given the number of books we read and the amount that we like to talk about her books, we thought it might be better just to do a standalone live show. So stay tuned for that. It'll probably be, I mean, we haven't talked about it at all, but probably like around the same timing as these have tended to be. So if you would like to finish any of her books before that, it would be a great time to do that. And I think probably that live show is going to have a lot of spoilers for the books. So just keep that in mind. But yeah, so you will see us again for this, but not discussing a book. So let's go ahead and start with some quick introductions, although of course you know us probably by now. And Hana is already linked in the description, but Hana, if you would like to give just a little introduction and just I guess start with the intro.
Hi everyone. I as you will be aware by now, I am Hana of Ball Gowns and Books on mainly Instagram and blog at the moment, and I read fairly widely, quite a lot of fantasy, good amount of other stuff, and yeah, I love Frances Hardinge as usual. Here we are.
Yes. Yep. So hi everyone, I'm Kara. My channel is obviously Wild Book Garden, which is where all of these have been hosted. Also clearly a big fan of Frances Hardinge. And I also read a lot of fantasy and also read a lot of everything, like historical fiction, nonfiction, contemporary, occasionally some romance and some other things, and also all kinds of age ranges. That's something that's really important to me. I've done quite a few projects on that now. And yeah, that's you'd think by like the 9th or 10th live show I would have something ready, and I never do. So we are going to start with the actual discussion. We are going to have a very short non-spoiler part, but because of the way this book is written, it's really hard to talk about a lot of stuff without spoilers. So apologies for that. It's going to be a very short non-spoiler section, but we will let you know when we get into spoilers. And before we get into that, I did want to give content notes for grief, violence, PTSD, murder, and some references to cannibalism and domestic abuse. Can you think of any others, Hana? I should have checked before we went live.
I think those were the ones I had to. It's sort of non-standard content warnings for some of them.
Yeah, it's hard to know like how to describe them exactly, yeah. But yeah, so those are the ones that are likely to come up in this discussion.
I think so.
So just be aware of that going in. And let's go ahead and start, as always, with general thoughts and rating, if you find that's helpful. This is a new release, so obviously neither of us had read this before, so just general thoughts.
Yeah, I really like this one. I think I gave it 4.5 stars, which was something of a relief after the last couple. But yeah, I just really liked the project of it. I feel like some of the themes are similar to things she's done before, but some of them are fairly new for her as well. And obviously I loved like the main characters and the writing and the setting and everything. So yeah, I think fairly high in my rankings.
Yeah. I also gave it 4.5, although it's like, I don't know. Sometimes I think about it, I'm like, is this really a 5? Like, I don't know. I definitely also think it's fairly high up in my ranking, and also a relief after I was not the biggest fan of Deep Light. So I'm glad that I like really enjoyed this one. And yeah, I definitely agree with you about the themes. Like some of them feel familiar to the kinds of things she usually writes about, but we also have some like new ideas that I think are going to be really interesting to discuss. Yeah, I'm trying to think of any other stuff that we can get into that's not spoilery. I guess we could talk about the world building a little bit without spoilers. So if you had any thoughts on the setting specifically, we obviously have like the deeps, like the wilds, like the deep wilds, and I think the shallow wilds, and various other like cities. So if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I really like the setting. It felt like one of those classic like Hardinge settings that's a character in its own right. I felt like right from the prologue. The prologue, I love the prologue. It feels, like a living creature right from the beginning, and you can feel the atmosphere of it, and I like it. I don't really picture scenes from books. I don't picture like settings or characters or anything, but it's one of those settings where you can just feel what it would be like.
Yeah, I really liked it as well. I also think that's like an amazing prologue. One thing I really like about the setting too is I feel like it feels, and this kind of goes into some of the other like elements of the book, but it feels more like a fairy tale than some of her other books do. Obviously she puts her own twist on it, but like I really like that. I especially liked the like way that the wilds always look ordinary. Like that's like kind of their defense mechanism, but like the people who know, it's like they have to, like Kellen is like continuously reminding himself like they're lying. It's not like he'll look at just this like boring patch of forest and half of his mind is like, oh, nothing important is happening there, and the other half is like, yes there is, you have to pay attention. That just feels very like kind of old school fair folk, in a way that I really liked. So I also really liked the setting. A1 gave it 4 stars, but well aware needs to reread it when it will probably elevate to 5 stars. Yeah, that's kind of the feeling I have, is like, I'm pretty sure when I reread this one, it would be a 5-star. I really liked it as well. Yes, world building was phenomenal as usual. Yeah.
Yeah, I loved, and on your fairy tale point, like there's a bit towards the end where he thinks like he remembered what happened to the old people in the story who didn't listen to the warnings. I could go through like the classic lines that you hear, stuff like that. Yeah, I really felt like an old tale.
Yeah. Or like that moment, I think it's around that same part where like he's going to be the skeleton that the hero finds, like just very, I like how like self-aware the characters were, that they were basically living in a fairy tale world. I liked that a lot. And it's in a way, like you were saying, it's like a very standard, like this is her thing, like the kinds of settings she does, but it also felt like a very distinct kind. Like she hasn't done this kind of feeling before specifically. Yeah. Okay. I think that's pretty much everything we can talk about without spoilers. So if you do not want to be spoiled, then we will see you later. Again, stay tuned for our announcement on our kind of reflection live show, where we're just going to talk about like some favorite things, maybe our least favorites, just like noteworthy things, just like reflecting on the project as a whole. We're going to have some fun questions. So come with answers prepared if you would like to. And yeah, so we're going to go ahead and get into spoilers now. So let's start, as we usually do, with our main characters. We actually have 2 points of view in this, which I think is really interesting. She doesn't do that very often. Like the only other one I can really think of is the Fly By Night series, because I think we kind of follow Mosca and Eponymous, but mostly Mosca. So thoughts on Kellen? Let's start with him because I think he shows up first.
Kellen took me a little bit to warm up to. I think I don't often have a soft spot for like impulsively stupid characters, and like people who are stubborn to the point of stupidity. So initially I was a bit put off by him, but it only took a few chapters for me to start loving him. And I thought that his arc was so good to thinking that he was doing something good and then realizing like that he had made a bit of a mess of it, and then like we end with him actively working to make amends for what he's done. I love that.
Yeah. Like he basically kind of becomes a therapist. Like I just thought that was so interesting. Yeah, I also really liked Kellen. Similarly to you, I'm not usually a fan of impulsive characters, but I think what won me over to him pretty soon is like he was impulsive in the pursuit of good things. Like, but it was still like I loved him, but it was still frustrating to like watch him like repeatedly make the same mistake. Like Nettle is basically his impulse control. So that was sometimes rough, but yeah, I really loved him as well. Um, I I love that I appreciate that his stubbornness and his impulsiveness comes from a place of like, how could you not want to fix the things that are wrong in the world, you know? Like he's not at all a selfish character, even though he does have an arc of like realizing that he needs to relate to other people differently. But yeah, I like the way we're introduced to him as well. Like that scene, I think is so good for setting up his character and Nettle's character, and I mean just like the story in general. It's a good establishing character moment for him to have him like yelling at somebody who does bad things, and he's like, "I can't make you change. You have to want to change." Okay, so let's also talk about Nettle, our other point of view.
Do I even need to say anything?
So 1, 2, 3, we loved her. Like, yeah.
I love Nettle right from the beginning. She just like I'm running out of words to describe. But yeah, she's one of those characters who doesn't show her emotions but feels things so deeply and has so much grief, but she's still like kind, and she still sees the good in people, and she tries so hard to help everyone that she can.
Yeah. I really loved her as well. I think it takes us a little longer to get to know her than Kellen, but that is like very appropriate for her character. And yeah, she's carrying so much, and she reminds me actually of Hathen, who I love, because she's like very unassuming, but she like gets things done, and I mean, actually, some of the themes are kind of similar, like the idea of revenge and like how far you can go for that. Yeah, and I just since we're in spoiler territory, I love that moment where Nettle comes so close to cursing Tansy. Like I wasn't sure if she was going to do it, just because we didn't know. I mean, like it's obviously really, really hard to like hold on and not curse somebody once you have one. But she says like to Tansy that like, you know, she can hurt her, she can kill her, but she can't turn her into her. And I just I love Nettle. Yeah. Egwin says, I love that she did a boy and a girl point of view equally. Nettle was awesome. Yes. I actually had a question about that. What did you think about like the last couple books? She's had a male protagonist, and I just wanted to I just think that's interesting. I don't know if you have like specific thoughts on that, because the last time she did that was Verdigris Deep, I think, which is a while ago. So I don't know.
Well, even A Skinful of Shadows was a female perspective.
Yeah.
So it's just Deep Light and then this.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess I hadn't really thought about it. Yeah, I don't know.
It's okay if you don't have
specific. No, yeah, I don't know if I have any particular thoughts on it. I guess, I mean, I suppose she's writing what she knows, I guess. I don't know, I wonder if like something like Gulfstream Island or Cuckoo Song, like if they would have been as like they would have been different stories with a male protagonist.
Yeah. I just thought it was interesting. Like it was something that I noticed, and I almost wonder if it's like her challenging herself, you know, a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I don't have like a really deep like thematic question about that. I just thought that was really interesting that she doesn't often write male protagonists, but like the last couple books we've had them. But like Eowyn said, I also really like that she wrote a boy and a girl point of view. Like I think that they like the way they split the book. I really liked that. I think she does male protagonists very well, but I noticed she was trying to be a lot more inclusive with this book. Yeah, I noticed that as well. Yeah, I liked that.
Yeah, and I mean, I saw quite a few books saying like how refreshing it was to have a male and a female protagonist and no romance, which like clearly romance isn't something she's interested in writing, which I'm all here for that. But yeah, so it's something that other people are picking up on as well.
Yeah, like they clearly have like a really deep bond, but like we don't really get into like the specific nature of it because it almost like doesn't matter to them. Like they're like the most important, some of the most important people in each other's lives, and that's kind of like the main thing. And actually, speaking of that, do you have anything specific about their like friendship, their relationship? We've kind of talked about it a little bit already, but I don't know if you had anything else to say.
Yeah, I thought it was really so like in comparison with Deep Light, for instance, because Nettle and Kellen, even though they really care about each other, their friendship is also kind of dysfunctional at the beginning. Mm-hmm. But like because they care about each other so much, they care about like fixing it and realizing like what each other are going through and working through that and understanding each other better, which I thought was really nice.
Yeah, and I love the way they balance each other. Like we were kind of joking about Nettle being Callan's impulse control, which like she pretty much literally is. But I still feel like I this is something I always love when like characters in a book realize like they have to start like thinking of like, okay, how would this person approach this problem? Mm-hmm. And that gives them an appreciation for the amount of strength that other character has. Like I really loved seeing Callan realize like just, I mean, he's always appreciated Nettle, but like appreciating her even more and like understanding just a little bit what she's been going through. And yeah, like there's the part where he's like, he's used to coming up with like half a plan that doesn't make sense and then Nettle fixes it. So he's like, what do I do when it's like checking his own plan for holes was exhausting. Which I think is funny, but also like, yes, Callan is becoming more self-aware.
Yeah, I also loved the bit that was like, Nettle always picked holes in all the plans, but once he started, she was all in. Like,
yes, I love them as a team so much. Like there's that part too where Callan is thinking, he's like, if I could just get Nettle, like I think it's when he's like going to be auctioned, and he's like, if I can just get Nettle on this boat. It's like he had this vague idea that if they were together, like nobody could beat them, and I'm like, I mean, it's kind of true. Yeah, I like their friendship was like one of my favorite parts of the book. I really loved it, and I feel like I'm trying to remember. I feel like this is one of the books where there's been like a one person and one person like really strong friendship, because like we have friend groups a lot of times. I guess A Skin Full of Shadows kind of was like that, but they're like her half brother is not in the book for most of it. Yeah. So anyway, I just thought that's interesting. I only noticed that now. Eowyn said she only hinted at the romance. Yeah, I feel like it's one of those things that you could read into it. Like for me, it was like if either of them like decides to have a romantic interest later, I can't really picture them with somebody else. But I don't feel like this book was necessarily trying to get into it like one way or the other.
Yeah, I agree. Like I think you can read it if you want to see it, but I saw them more as like a sibling relationship.
Yeah, I think it could be read a lot of different ways, which I like. Okay, let's move on to Gaul. Is that how you say it?
That's how I was saying it.
Thoughts on him and his marsh horse?
Creepy.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I feel like this is what I mean about like non-standard content warnings, because like weird creepy horses and accidentally eating your sister because you're both turned into birds.
Oh my god, like I could not, I like didn't understand what had happened there at first. And then like when the book kept like describing like what happened after, like when Cole turns back and like Iris being missing, and I'm like, oh my god, like he ate his sister. Yeah. I don't know how to like, I don't have a question about that. That's just something that happened.
Yeah. No, so about Gaul, I don't know. I feel like we don't really get, because he's such a because he's half a wild creature, we don't get much of a sense for him as a person until quite late.
Yeah.
So like, because you know he's not a monster, but he doesn't, like, it's difficult to understand him or like get a sense for him while he's being a horse, or like, you know what I mean?
When he's sicking his carnivorous horse on people.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought he was super interesting. He was one where like, so he meets them and he's like very sinister, and it's like, okay, I guess you're a bad guy. And then as the book keeps going on, I'm like, okay, he's like developing. We're getting to know him a little more. Maybe he's not so bad. Maybe this is going to be one of those classic like monster but not really, characters from Frances Hardinge. And then like as the book keeps going and Nettle starts pointing out like, we don't actually know if we can trust him, like look at all the people he's killed, like with this man-eating horse. I'm like, so what are you, like, are you a bad guy? And then I was like kind of surprised where we ended things with him by the end, because like I was honestly getting worried for like Kellen and Nettle and like the other characters. I'm like, maybe he is going to turn on them. I don't know. Yeah, he was like a really interesting character. That's like, he's in the book so much, and like, but like you were saying, we don't actually know him as well as a lot of the other characters. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really have a lot of coherent thoughts about him. I'm like, what is his deal? Yeah, any other thoughts on Gaul? I don't have very good ones.
No, I don't have very much to say about him, I don't think.
Yeah, like I thought he was really interesting and I liked his character in the book, but I didn't know what to make of him for a lot of it, which kind of made it hard in some places to like get as invested in him as other characters. It's like, should I get attached to you? Or are you going to kill more people?
Yeah.
Okay, speaking of killing more people, Tansy. Let's talk about Tansy.
Yeah, I didn't like classic. I think what I wrote in my notes was like classic misdirect. I didn't see that coming at all.
Yeah.
But I thought it was so sad. Like the fact that she and Nettle both thought that, the other were doing so well and neither of them were. And if they'd just been able to talk about it, maybe things would have been better.
Yeah. I actually, it took like 9 books, but I finally predicted a Frances Hardinge twist villain. Like, I mean, it wasn't very early on though. It was like right before the reveal happened, because like Nettle was like, I think I know who it is. And it was like saying it was like this terrible like realization for her. And I'm like, okay, who would be the most devastating villain reveal? And I'm like, Tansy. That's who it was. Yeah, I think that's so, her story is so sad as well. And like you said, that like if just her and Nettle had maybe talked more, like that maybe this wouldn't have happened. Yeah, I really liked her, so I was really sad that she was like the evil person. Anyone said never saw Tansy coming. Classic Hardinge. Yeah.
I think I also
does this every book, and yet most of the time I'm still like, whoa.
Yeah, but I also, because this book felt different in the first half. Like a bit of it is like what we were saying at the beginning about how it feels like a fairy tale. Like in some ways, like the number of characters they meet and the way the plot is structured. I think I wrote in my notes that like it doesn't feel like a Harding plot, and so I wasn't expecting it to turn into like this is what Frances Harding does and this is how she gets it.
Fooled us again. Yeah. And similarly to Tansy, do we have thoughts on Amit? Another twist villain.
Really creepy. Yeah, I thought like it was especially creepy the way like he tries to be a gentleman and he's like he presents himself as so polite and so kind, but actually he's just after power. Like it took me a little bit to pass what his motivation was, because just wanting power like seemed, not that it seemed too small, but it seemed kind of random in this world. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, pretty creepy.
Yeah. He reminded me of, I can't remember his name now, but like the really polite twist villain in the Fly By Night books, the first one. So that was the only indication I had that maybe something wasn't right with him, which is more indication than I usually have with Frances Harding's books. Yeah, I agree. I think like the fact that he sees himself as like this polite guy and he's a gentleman and like it's like he might like, you know, lie to people, use them to curse other people, ruin people's lives, kill people, but he's a gentleman. Like it's very eerie. And I also like when Nettle wasn't sure about him, I wasn't sure either, because like he had been so kind about her brother. And yeah, I just thought that was really well done. Like I'm always impressed when like the author can make you kind of like have the same experience as the main character, you know? Yeah, but he's like, yeah, really horrible. I mean, the way that he's manipulating Salvation, like that he's figured out a way to like weaponize cursors by like lying to them about who's responsible for things. Yeah, I thought he was a very effective villain. Also, his demise was pretty satisfying. Like when he goes to like stab the book bearer, I'm like, I don't feel like this is going to work. It did not. That book bearers were so random and weird too. Like so interesting, but I'm like they're like fantasy world rotaries. Like just like what a fascinating concept. Like, yeah. I mean, as soon as we like met them, I was like, okay, this is going to be important later, but I don't know how. And then when Kellen was like, we have to figure out a way to give Amit to agree to something he can't back out of. I'm like, well, you do have a whole race of beings who like do that. And it's so weird too that like nobody knows why. Nobody knows why they do this. Like, strange. I mean, I guess that fits with like the wilds. They don't really understand why most of the creatures do what they do, but anyway, I'm like way off topic now. I just keep thinking of like, yeah, that was really weird too. Since we kind of touched on it a little, do we want to talk about Salvation, like the group at all? Kind of like where things ended up going with them?
Yeah, like again, like I just thought it was so sad. Like Rue, the woman who she meets who wants to find her daughters, and like the way they've been manipulated, it was just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Like none of the ones that we meet are like evil people. They just like have so much trauma that they don't know what to do with. And like the fact that none of the people who we meet who've cast curses are at peace. Like they're all still upset, or lots of them, you know, want the curse to be reversed, or they curse again, or they're not, you know, like cursing and I guess taking revenge doesn't fix anything.
Yeah, like none of them were able to really fix the problem by cursing. Yeah, I thought it was really interesting and really surprising to me that the Red Hospital did not end up being part of the conspiracy. Like I feel like that's unusual because like we meet the doctor and he seems so nice, and I was kind of expecting to find out that he was like evil and he was, you know, like maybe doing something to the cursors like Salvation thought, and it turns out like no, like he really was kind of doing the best he could. Like people were misinformed and they were just kind of doing what they could. And so I actually like that. I like that, like we find out with, you know, Salvation, like the vast majority of them are just like ordinary people who are doing their best. It's like that's kind of what like I like the way that it wasn't like Salvation was all right and then everybody else was like all wrong. It was like they did have to compromise, which I liked. Okay. Just a couple more character questions and then we can get into some of the other stuff. Yannick.
He's just so interesting. Like he's so random. Like this half bird boy. Like what do you do with that? But again, yeah, like everything about this book is just so sad.
Yes. Yeah.
Like the way he can't relate to Nettle anymore, but he wants to. And in some ways, it's like it's not that it's his fault, but he did choose to be like that, and he can't. Yeah. He, you know, and he has this whole other life that he can never share with her.
Yeah. Yeah. I was not a big fan of Yannick at first, because of the choice that he made, and I was like, how dare you leave Nettle to carry this alone? Like, I found him really frustrating, and I found him very selfish. And I'm not like, obviously the when he saw the pain that Nettle was in, like I understand why he did what he did, but like that doesn't make me think like that he made the right choice or that it was okay. And then when he has like a mate who's a goal, and like I just I have so many questions about that. Like, are you a person or an animal? Because either way, that's weird. But also, then when he was like, yeah, if I don't go back and help feed them, they're probably going to starve, and I'm not going to do it because I forgot about them because I'm here now. And like we do see that I think he does go back near the end, or it's implied that he will. But like, I found Yannick kind of frustrating. By the end, I came around to him a little more, but I just feel like, yeah, I guess selfish is like the way that I feel about him, even though it's for understandable reasons. Like, why would anybody choose to have the kind of pain that Nettle has? But still, also, as we've discussed, I love Nettle, and so I hate that he just kind of left her to do everything by herself. I really hate that. So, yeah, I have complicated feelings on Yannick.
Yeah, and when Nettle's like, but you came back, and he's like, yes, but I came back for selfish reasons. Like, he even acknowledges it himself that he didn't do it only because he cares about her. But I feel like he does make up for that by the end.
He does, yeah. Yeah, he has a pretty good character arc as well. I definitely liked him a lot more by the end. And he was like very well written as a character. Like I understood why he did what he did. It just pissed me off. Like, Eowyn said, cursors are just people who have a feeling of injustice. But as Cook says, my host started to realize that just because somebody feels wronged, that doesn't mean they are. Yeah. I thought it was really interesting how the curses started as an idea for like powerless people to get justice, and how that kind of became like twisted, because then if anybody can do that, then people are going to end up with that power who are not pursuing justice, you know, or who maybe they think they are, but they haven't really thought through all the consequences or something. Yeah. Did we want to talk about Cook? I didn't have any particular feelings on him. Like he felt more like a plot character than anything.
Yeah, he felt like he was just there as a way for us to speak to little brothers. Didn't feel like he was much of a character in his own right.
Which is fine because I thought those scenes were like creepy but very interesting. But yeah, I didn't have particular feelings about him. Okay, I'm trying to decide which of these makes the most sense to go to next. I guess this is still kind of a character question. Did you have any particular like unraveling customer? I don't know how you would describe it. Is there any that like stood out to you or that you like wanted to talk about? Like, because you mentioned how there's like these side characters who just pop up and then we never see them again. And I was just wondering if there were any of those that you like wanted to talk about or you had an especially strong reaction to, like any of their like stories or anything.
Yeah. I don't know. I felt. I guess the main ones were Clover and Lynette.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if I have particular feelings about either of them. Like I really thought Clover's story was devastating. And even Lynette's like as sort of a metaphor for domestic violence. Like they both suffered a lot. But I feel like they were more important thematically than like as characters themselves, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think we didn't really spend enough time with any of these to like I don't think they were supposed to be main characters. Like I think you said, I think a lot of times they functioned as like metaphors or like showing like consequences for things and kind of, exploring the themes and everything. Yeah, I thought Clover's story and like everything related to the village was like, really sad, as you said. I think the one that I found most devastating was Lynette because of, it was a metaphor for domestic violence and yeah, just the way that it's talked about it's so smart. The way Frances Harding like mirrors things that people will say or think when it happens in the real world. And I love that part at the end of the chapter where Kellen says something like, "She has terrible taste in men," and Nettle says, "Maybe terrible men have taste in her."
Yeah, I
And
highlighted that one too.
yeah, like I love that. And I'm like, that really, it made me realize how often, even people who won't say things that are like explicitly victim blaming, like, well, why did she stay? Or like, why didn't somebody leave? Like, even people who won't say stuff like that, they'll say like, oh, she just really has bad taste in men. And it's like, why do we say that instead of like horrible men are targeting her over and over, like, so yeah, I thought that part was like really well done. Some of those scenes with like the people, like the cursors and everything, those are some of the scenes where I'm like, maybe this is a 5-star. I don't know. Like, I thought those were really well done. Okay, so most of our, I think that's like all the character stuff I had, which we can circle back to any of them as well. But moving on to some other things, we talked about the plot of this one a little bit and how it feels different. Did you have anything else that you wanted to say about that?
I think I've said most of what I had. I guess it feels like a tighter plot. Like even though it's complicated, it's more focused. There are less like meanders.
And I feel like even though we do have the like multiple characters just kind of popping up, being temporarily important, and then just kind of disappearing, I feel like it was less confusing in the way that you figure out where, like, there was that point where I'm like trying to figure out who was in conspiracy with who, but for the most part, I think it wasn't as confusing as regards the antagonist and the conflict.
Yeah, I felt like it was fairly like linear, like everything followed on from the next thing. Like it wasn't all over the place the way some of them are.
Yeah. I really liked that there were chunks of this book that kind of felt like a murder mystery. Like it was, I don't know, it was weird, but like I liked that. Like I liked the like part near the beginning, and then at some of the like unravelings that Kellen and Nettle do, where they're like trying to figure out like just like what happened and everything. Like I just found that really interesting. I don't know, like I'm realizing that I kind of like when like mystery is like a subplot in like another genre. So I don't know, I thought that was like an interesting touch. And then yeah, we talked a little bit about the kind of like fairy tale logic of the setting and the plot, which I think we both were saying we really enjoyed. What about the magic itself, like the cursing and the unraveling and any of that? Like, did you have specific thoughts about that, either like as a plot device or like, you know, more metaphorically? Like I always enjoy like fantasy that uses like textile or like weaving ideas, so like I thought that was very cool. And yeah, any thoughts on like the little brothers? Like there's a lot happening.
Yeah, like the little brothers are so creepy. Like when they're like, Kellen, you would be better with 8 legs. But at the same time, like deep down, they mean well.
Yeah, and they can change their mind. Like they can be
Yeah.
convinced to do something differently, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, and like I guess like thematically as a way to explore like what hate and hurt can do and how people like use those or react to those emotions. I thought it was such a like interesting and powerful way to look at that.
Yeah. Yeah. The little brothers were very interesting. Like them and like the book bearers and like some of these other, I mean, they're all kind of like classic Frances Hardinge creations, but like for some reason they didn't feel like they fit together in the same book for me necessarily. But then I kind of realized that that's the point. Like the wilds are just so weird. Like nobody really understands them. So like things just happen. Like things just pop up. And yeah, I really like the way that the cursing and the unraveling was used to like explore like ideas of revenge and like hate, and justice. And I really liked Kellen's like realization that like, because I didn't see that coming, that like the little brother that died with him like blessed him, like gave him this to do what he's been doing basically. I really liked all of that, and I'm glad I was kind of expecting the little brothers to be more sinister. Like, I mean, definitely the idea of them is very creepy. I guess I should have mentioned, like, if you're not a fan of spiders, maybe like approach with caution. I mean, I'm not like a huge fan of them, but I feel like at least it wasn't super explicit. But like some of the references to people just getting like swarmed with them was like a little much. But yeah, I feel like in a lot of other books, they would have turned out to be much more sinister than they were. And they're not. They're just like, they're not human. And so they don't always understand what is good for humans. Like what you said when he's like, when one of them is telling Kellen he'd look better with 8 legs. And then when Kellen agrees, like, okay, if I can't find a heart for Gaul, you can turn me into a man spider. And I'm like, this seems like a bad idea. Like when he comes back without one the first time, I was like, did you? But they let him try again, which I feel like is also something that I maybe didn't expect. But
yeah. And I love Kellen's thing of like, you don't need another spider, you need somebody who understands humans, because you don't, and you're trying your best, but like you just can't understand.
Yeah, and I like that moment was one of the times where Kellen's like temper and outspokenness actually helped him, because like yeah, we interact with people very differently. Like Kellen, a lot of his outbursts, I'm like, this is only going to hurt you. Why are you doing this? Like I'm much more like Nettle in the way that I like handle conflict, but I do appreciate that I feel like the book did a good job of showing that like a balance of their approaches is what's needed, because like Kellen is good at talking to people when he can keep a hold on his temper, and he also like there is something to be said for like decisive action when he has like half a plan and he's like, I'll figure out the rest as I go. Like, terrifying. I could never, but I like that the story shows that like Nettle and Kellen really are like a perfect team because they need both of those. Yeah. And then we talked a little bit about this already, but I think one of the like huge themes of this book is anger versus hate, and like revenge and justice, and how all of those things are connected. So thoughts on that? That's a very broad topic, but I was especially thinking of the way that Clover's unraveling of her curse, it wasn't apologizing to her mother. It was telling her what her mother did wrong, which I really like. I really like that the book showed that like atonement or forgiveness doesn't always mean like it doesn't always go the way that you would expect. You know, it's not always one person apologizing for everything. So thoughts on like any of those topics?
Yeah, I think we've touched on some of it already, but yeah, generally I was really impressed with how like nuanced it was. And yes, like I shouldn't be surprised, but yeah, because I like we get so many of the like random cursed characters that we get to see like so many different versions of like how it plays out, or like where those emotions go and how it manifests. Because you know there's Spike, who's like, I keep getting cursed, maybe it's me, you know, compared to Clover, like you said, or anyone else. And like people deal with anger and hurt in so many different ways, and I guess like the message is that hate is never productive, regardless of how you like, no matter how you express it, it will never make you feel better. Whereas like hurt and anger can be dealt with like the right support.
Yeah, and I really like the clear distinction. Like Kellen even says it in dialogue at one point about the difference between anger and hate. And he was like, anger by itself is not a bad thing necessarily, but like hate is. It's kind of like it like destroys the host almost, you know, like in, to use like a cursing metaphor. Yeah, I also really liked all the nuance there. And I like that we see, like for Kellen and Nettle, a lot of the good that they do is fueled by anger, but it's in like a positive way. Like they're angry on behalf of people who are suffering. And I like that that is shown to be very different from the kind of anger that can involve cursing, you know, like revenge and like wanting to hurt others. Eowyn said, Clover's story shows that anger and resentment comes from somewhere, but that we don't always want to act on that feeling. Yeah, like, especially the way that some of the things around cursing are described, it's clearly very, very difficult to resist using a curse egg once you have it. And so, like, I think that is, like, it does say something interesting about, like, people's better natures, you know, like they might have this moment of like, oh, I wish I could just get rid of you, but like maybe they don't actually mean it. And I think that's something that the little brothers have to learn as well. It's like, you know, you shouldn't judge people by their like split second decisions or anger.
Yeah, and I also think it's really interesting that like cursors are more likely to curse again. Like, so like acting on your hate only breeds more hate.
Yeah. And I like that we don't get this confirmed, but I feel like it's probably true. Kellen and Nettle realize because Nettle has been a cursor for a year, which everybody is shocked to hear because that's so difficult. They think about like there could be like hundreds or thousands of people like her who are fighting this every day, and we just don't know because of course they don't want to get thrown in Red Hospital. Like, yeah, I don't know where I was going with that as connects to your point, but it seemed connected in my head. Yeah, I really like the way that like all of these like interconnected issues of like revenge and justice, forgiveness, and like anger versus hate. I really liked how all of those were talked about and how we see so many different forms of them. Yeah. And I like going back to Clover's story, I like that Clover is not the one who has to take care of her mother. Like, forgiveness doesn't mean opening yourself to somebody hurting you again. And I think that's like a very common thing that happens. Like, you don't have to let someone back into your life. Like, you can find peace in yourself. And you know, we were talking about with like realizing that hate is not going to get you anywhere. You can find peace within yourself, but that doesn't mean that you owe it to the person who hurt you to let them do whatever they want. I really like that. And then I think one of the last specific questions I had, which we also kind of touched on, where do you feel like this book fits in terms of Frances Hardinge's like usual level of like darkness or sadness or like creepiness? Yeah, we talked about this a little bit, but like I don't know. I just think it's interesting because like as a whole, I feel like the atmosphere is some of the kind of like creepier ones that she's done. But in terms of the actual story, like mostly it doesn't feel as dark as some of her others. But there's like individual things that happen where I'm like, this is like the saddest, most messed up thing she's ever written. Like, I'm thinking about Cole and Iris. Like, oh my God. And that's like right near the beginning. So I don't just thoughts on it. I was curious to hear if you had any.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like it's so dark, but it doesn't feel as like visceral as like Deep Light. I felt the creepiness. And like Cuckoo Song is so creepy. And this one doesn't feel like that, even though it is like, you know, like we talked about Gaul and the little brothers and everything, like it should be terrifying. But it doesn't feel like that.
Yeah. I wonder too if part of it is like, I feel like this is one of her most hopeful endings. Like, I think it is. I mean, I'm trying to remember, like, from the other books we've read. I think because, like, even when things wrap up really satisfyingly, there's, like, usually this element of, like, bittersweetness. Like, I mean, even Cuckoo Song, which has a much happier ending than you're worried about for a while because you think the main character could die. Even that, it's like, it's kind of a little tiny bit sad because she realizes that her family is never going to love her. And she does find like another family, which is great. But there's still that element of like what could have been, you know? Whereas with this book, it's like, I feel like we're actually fixing things. Like Kellen and Nettle are together, uncursed. Salvation and the Red Hospital are like working together. I mean, it's not like easy. Like we hear that, you know, it takes them a while to figure stuff out, but I wonder if she felt like she put so much other like messed up stuff at the beginning that she's like, you could have a pretty clearly happy ending. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good point.
Anyone said it's so difficult to categorize. That's like her favorite thing, which I love. Like her books, like how do you categorize them with anything? But yeah. We also, I just realized we didn't really talk about the fact that Kellen is cursed. I don't know if we had reactions to that. That's more of like a plot thing, but yeah, I thought that was really interesting and how like cursors are the only people that can't be cursed, which I think is interesting. Like doing that to somebody protects you.
Yeah, I feel like I didn't really register that Kellen was cursed because I couldn't quite work out what happened to him that was different to how he usually was.
Right.
Like he was just unraveling more stuff than, because he already was unraveling stuff before, so I couldn't quite tell what was different.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of like his curse was just like making him more of what he already was. Like even like his recklessness and his temper, which get a lot worse when he's not wearing his gloves. That's also just something that happens. Yeah, I thought that was interesting. I also, does it tell you? Yeah, see, I find that odd. The synopsis, I feel like for so long the like Goodreads summary for this one was so vague. It was only like 1.5 sentences, and then on the actual book it tells you like a huge chunk of the story, because it tells you that Kellen has also been cursed, and unless he and Nettle can remove his curse, Kellen is in danger of unraveling everything and everyone around him. And they also tell you that Nettle is recovered from entrapment in bird form, which like I feel like that's also, that happens pretty close to the book, but you don't know that from the beginning. It's kind of a big deal when you find that out. I don't understand who makes these.
Yeah, I find that odd as well, because like the point of the book isn't them breaking Kellen's curse. Like, yeah, it happens, but it doesn't feel like it's what the book is about.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like that's initially what makes them make some of their decisions, but they end up finding out so much other stuff that like it kind of becomes like a side quest even for the main characters. Like they're like trying to save the world and maybe fix like Kellen. I keep doing that along the way. Yeah. I don't know. Interesting. I think that's everything I have. Do we want to talk about anything else before we get to quotes?
One other thing I noted was the like workers' rights angle, which was like, it was
Yes.
a tiny thing. It only came up once or twice, but I really like felt like she was trying to make a point.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I like that as well, and I feel like one of the cool things about having kind of these like mini plots, you know, like where they fixate or like they focus on this one curse that they're unraveling. One of the things that I think is kind of cool about that is it lets her kind of dig into specific issues and make a big point about them, but not like have it be the focus of the book. Because, like you said, it's like it doesn't come up that much, but that is like a huge emphasis for a little bit.
Mhm.
And then, like, the domestic violence one is one that, like, page wise, it's not that much of the book, but it's really, really effective in that, like, scene, you know? Yeah, I also like that. I liked
yeah,
that
and
too.
like Kellen's whole backstory is about
Yeah.
like industrialization.
Yeah.
Like what?
I know. Yeah, there's like a lot going on in this book. Um, yeah, and like I realized near the end of the book when it said something about him like leaving his village again. I was like, I think I just forgot for most of this book that like Kellen's family kicked him out. Like, because it was like sad when it happened, but then everything else starts happening and like I'm all focused on that. And then I think also it's like I liked him and Nettle and eventually Yannick as a team so much that I kind of just was like, oh, they found their little group, you know? And it wasn't until the end where I'm like, oh yeah, that happened because his family kind of sucked. Like, yeah, which also is kind of a representation of like putting like money or like livelihood above people. Like I understand why his village would do that because like they depended, like he was ruining what they, you know, made a living from, but pretty hard on him.
Yeah.
I mean, they at least like, you know, gave him some money and resources before they kicked him out, but still, like, pretty rough. Okay.
Yeah, I think those were my points mostly.
Alrighty. Do we want to do quotes, and then if we think of something else, we'll talk about that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead and start us off.
All right. I feel like most of my quotes for this one are like random individual lines.
Mm-hmm.
They're just like throwaway sentences. Start with so I did this one on ebook, and now like the quotes are not working as well as they usually work.
So annoying.
You can't cure a curse, you have to unravel it. You have to find the reasons that wove it and work out how to pull the threads loose. It's easy to curse, but it's not. Like, you have to like really deal with the consequences of it once you've done that.
Yeah. This one is near the beginning, and this is one of the things that I'm like, okay, in a lot of cases, a character like Kellen would probably frustrate me even more, but I do love him. It says, Nettle was right. Nobody else would look for somebody so loud, awkward, and uncompromising. There was a tender place in Kellen's soul, like an unhealed wound. Injustices grated against it and made him grit his teeth. It's like,
yeah, I had that one
everything
too.
he does is for a good reason, even when he's being a dummy.
Yeah, go ahead if you have another one.
I had quite a few like funny ones for a book that is like pretty.
Yeah.
Like when Nettle took a deep breath and let it out slowly. Could you both stop eating the clue? She said evenly, just for a moment.
Yeah, I had that too.
Like poor Nettle is like trying to hold everything together. It's like they really, and like what's funny about it is not just like that's a hilarious line, but like that's literally what was happening. It's like Yannick and Colin were both eating the clue.
Yeah, like sort of in a similar vein, I had it was the warm, encouraging tone people only ever used when the guests had already promised to depart.
Yes. I love that. Hello, we're on the quote section. If you just joined us. Yeah, and then there's the one we talked about with the she's got terrible taste in men, Kellen said aloud. It might not be her fault, said Nettle. Maybe terrible men just have taste in her.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I like this one as well. Gentleness is often mistaken for weakness, but the two are not even close cousins.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I also liked real hearts are nothing but trouble. They break and bleed and bring their owners torment, but without them, existence is hollow, only breath following breath.
Yeah. I like that one too. This is another funny one. From Kellen, of course. He's talking to Amit, I think. You're good at planning ahead, but I'm good at making lots of stupid plans really fast, and sometimes that's better.
Yeah.
My gosh, this is like the same thing. He says to Nettle, and this is like their entire relationship. I have one more plan, said Kellen. It's terrible and you'll hate it. Do you want to hear it?
Yeah, I also had it'll be different this time, said Kellen, feeling his spirits rising at last. It'll be safer or differently dangerous.
I love them so much. Let's see. Oh, I liked this one too. Gall now had to treat his own life as valuable and did not seem used to this at all. It's like, oh. Sometimes, even though your horse is terrifying, you're like a nice guy. Yeah, I think those were the ones I had.
Yeah, I had powerful people can wave a piece of paper and the world dances to their tune. It's the powerless people who need curses. Then we come along and take away the only thing they have left.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, like we were talking about with, the driving theme of this book, we're not meant to just condemn everybody who has ever cursed or like had a curse or anything. It's like there is an understanding of why people would do it, and like it's because other things aren't working, you know, like yeah.
Yeah, I think that was most of mine. Like I had so many in this one, but
Yeah.
they're all like random things.
Yeah. I obviously liked the writing as usual. And I feel like this one had just like really interesting like concepts or images like we talked about, or like even just ideas where it's like this is so interesting you could write like an entire novella about this, but it's just like oh by the way like that the like something the Moonlight Market, is that what it was? Like that was really interesting, which also that's another very fairy tale thing, like kind of goblin market almost. And like I just really like the fairy tale stuff in general, like even like Nettle, like Frances Hardinge mentions in the author's note, like the Children of Lear story, which like that's what it made me think of, or like Tansey's backstory made me think of the Twa sisters, like that ballad where like one of them gets made into a harp, like just super interesting. Like the book bearers, the marsh horses,
yeah, the dancing star as well.
Yes, dancing. Yeah, I didn't even talk about the dancing star. Did we have like thoughts on that? That was another one where I'm like, this is really creepy, but I also feel bad for you, but I don't know if you're actually gonna betray everybody. Like,
yeah, I don't know if I had specific thoughts, but I thought, yeah, like its connection with Nettle was so interesting, and like the way it didn't want to like follow Amit's orders, but kind of had to, and it kind of did want to lead Nettle astray a little bit as well. And it was just it was really. I also like the quote that's something like Highlanders had trouble understanding that there were different types of floating lights in the wilds.
Yeah, it's like tourists. Like, I thought that was funny as well. And like the Glade Lord was so interesting. Like he was barely in it, but like that was like another like classic like fairy tale thing where it's like there are creatures who are not good or bad. They are just so different that they are dangerous because like they just don't think the way you do. I feel like she did. Like I think that kind of vibe is one of the things that made this feel like very old classic fairy tale in some places. Which I liked. I mean, I think she did a great job with that, which makes sense because that's kind of exactly her vibe. Like her atmosphere is like the creepy forest. And yeah, like don't do like follow the rules, you know, don't do the wrong thing. Yeah. This might be one of my favorite settings that she's done, just in terms of how like vibrant it is and like interesting.
Yeah, I feel like it's right up there with A Face Like Glass in terms
of. Yes. Actually, that was another question I was gonna ask that I forgot about. We've been doing this throughout the live show, but like any specific comparisons with her other books, like either similar or different? Because like I mentioned, I feel like Nettle and Hathin are very similar to me, like not in a way that I think like, oh, she did the same thing, but like I there's like connections between them. I feel like they would be friends.
Yeah, and I think the revenge thing as well
yes,
is a connection. I think in my original review I compared it to Girlstruck Island and Vertigo Deep.
Yeah. There were other. Oh, and I liked what you said near the beginning about comparing the central friendship to the one in Deep Light, and how like that is obviously a very like toxic, dangerous thing, and in Unraveller, it's like there is also a lot of friction and in a way, like there are some like very small similarities in how the characters relate to each other, like one of them being really reckless, you know, and the other one kind of like calming them down, but it's done so differently because like you said, they really do want to understand each other and to be there for each other, and that matters more than anything. Yeah, I also kind of had this feeling that like Nettle feels to me like a very classic Frances Hardinge protagonist, in all the ways that we love, because she's like very reserved. She has this like incredibly good heart that like, and all these like feelings that people don't see and all of that. Whereas I feel like Kellen is a little bit more like, he's kind of the character who would be a protagonist in a lot of books, but not usually in her books. But I like that he is. Like, we had kind of one of each. I mean, his, like, angry sense of justice is very much a Frances Hardinge thing. Like, and actually kind of his, like, his chaotic nature reminded me a little bit of Neverfell. Just kind of, like, blundering around trying to do the right thing. But I feel like he doesn't... Like, he feels much more like a standard fantasy protagonist, but not in like a bad way, not in a flat way or anything.
Yeah, I know what you mean, but I feel like this book wouldn't have been as successful with just Nettle as the point of view character.
I love having both of them. Yes. Everyone says it reminded me a lot of Twilight Robbery, as magic being very specific to rules and also times of day being very important. Yeah. And also like some of the conspiracy stuff reminded me a lot of that one too, of that series, especially the first book. Let me look at my shelf. I keep looking at books to see if there's anything else.
Yeah. I think the other thing is, I feel like with the others, I've been saying that it takes me a bit to warm up to them because I'm waiting for the characters to like form a team. Whereas this one, like because we had Nettle and Kellen right from the beginning, it didn't take, you know, like I was with it from the beginning. I didn't need to wait for that to happen.
It's like Team Hardinge go, like right from the beginning. Yeah, and I love. We talked about like the prologue being so good, and I love that like that first chapter is like they're already on like a case together and you already know exactly who does what in this like, situation. And like the like throwaway line about how like Nettle's always making herself get arrested with Kellen so that she can get him out. I love them both so much. Yeah. I think Kellen has... I feel like maybe he has one of my... Kellen and Nettle both have one of my favorite like character arcs in her books. I don't know. That's saying a lot though, because there's some that I really love. We'll debate this at our next live show. Okay, so anything else we want to discuss? I think that was everything that I had.
Yeah, I think it was everything from my side as well.
Just a reminder that we mentioned this at the beginning, we are going to be doing a reflection/wrap-up live show probably in about a month. But keep an eye on our social medias for confirmation. And yeah, it's just going to be like kind of not going to be super structured, but we're going to have some, like favorite, least favorite, like most surprising, some of those questions. And then Hana and I are also each bringing like a few that we're not telling the other person about. So you'll have some prepared answers and some off the cuff answers. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, so I guess just come prepared with all of your Frances Hardinge thoughts, feelings, and opinions. Because it's going to be really fun.
Yeah. Do you want to plug your next project?
Yeah, that's a good idea. So I just, within the last couple weeks, I did have a short announcement video go up about another read-along that is also kind of part of a bigger project I'm doing. So I started something called the Not a Genre Book Club. And the whole point is that we're reading middle grade and young adult books, which are not a genre, and basically giving them the like level of discussion that adult books or classics often get, which not that nobody discusses them, that way, but I think it's less common. And I think that's, a disservice to those books and to their readers. So I'm going to have like different guests hosts on. My co-host for the first read along, which is for the Fairyland series by Catherine M. Valente, is My Name is Marines. It's one of her favorite series. She's reread it a bunch. I have never read it, so I'm very excited to finally get to it. I'll go back and link Mari's channel as well. But yeah, we're both very excited. And that first live show should be near the end of this month, I think. But again, keep an eye on our social media for announcements. But if you've wanted to try Catherine and Valente, or if this is a series you enjoy, we'd love to have you. And yeah, this is kind of kicking off the whole Not a Genre book club thing. I'm also going to have like discussions and recommendations, but the book club part is going to be I'll have different guests on and we'll be reading sometimes just a couple books. Once in a while, we'll do like a series read along like this. You will be seeing Hana again. So yeah, I'm really excited about it. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And it's obviously something that I have very strong feelings about on my channel. So it's about time. I just made like an entire book club about it. So yeah. Hana, do you have anything coming up on your blog or anything that you want to talk about?
Nothing specific at the moment, I don't think.
Okay. And as I said, Hana is already linked in the description. Please follow her. She's lovely and talented and brilliant. And I'm so excited that you hosted this with me. Thank you guys so much for reading along with us. Yeah, I can't believe we finally read the last book. Yeah. I mean, this is not our final live show, but it feels like it is kind of because it's our last book one. I hope that you continue reading Frances Hardinge when she comes out with more books. Thank you for everyone joining and reading with us, discussing with us, anyone who's watching it back. Yeah, we've had a blast. It has been so fun to just get to talk about one of our favorite authors for hours. I love this.
Yeah, thank you, Eowyn, especially for being here every month.
Yes.
I really appreciate it.
Yes, shout out to Eowyn. Okay, anything to add, Hana?
I think that's everything.
All right, we will see you for our wrap up. Bye. Thank you guys